Psalm 99. The Lord reigns. Let the nations tremble. He sits enthroned between the cherubim. Let the earth shake. Great is the Lord in Zion. He is exalted over all the nations. Let them praise your great and awesome name. He is holy. The King is mighty. He loves justice. You have established equity. In Jacob, you have done what is just and right. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his footstool. He is holy. Moses and Aaron were among his priests. Samuel was among those who called on his name. They called on the Lord, and he answered them. He spoke to them from the pillar of cloud. They kept his statute and the decree he gave them. O Lord our God, you answered them. You were to Israel a forgiving God, though you punished their misdeed. Exalt the Lord our God and worship at his holy mountain, for the Lord our God is holy.
So Lois has already introduced a little bit of the theme, sharing our mountain stories together. I've got a bunch, but I know a lot of you do too, and I'm hoping that some of you will be willing to share your stories, either informally during the 10 o'clock time, or you can add some pictures to our slideshow and add it to the 10:30 slot as well. This summer I was sitting down to watch some TV and escape from reality for a little bit. And there was an old movie that was on. I have cable TV like many of us used to do, and then you're kind of dependent on whatever the networks decide to broadcast to you. And there was an old movie that I remember from the 90s, starring Hugh Grant, with his lovable British wit and charm, Cole Meany, who's an Irish actor, and a lovable cast of other folks. The movie was called The Englishman Who Went Up a Hill and Came Down a Mountain. Way too long of a title. But it was a fun movie of this one town in Wales who had long celebrated the mountain that was just outside of their community. And the British government had decided they were going to do a survey of all British territory and make a list of all of the mountains with their height. And they had determined that anything over 1,000 feet in elevation was a mountain, and anything less than that was a hill, just in terms of classification. And so Hugh Grant is one of these scientists who's come with the measurement tools to measure out the height of this mountain. And the people of the village gather together, and they're excited. They're even taking bets on what is going to be the official height of this mountain. And somebody comes into the pub where these bets are being gathered and scandalizes everybody by writing down his guess of 974 feet. And they're outraged. How dare you say this isn't going to be a mountain? Well, his bet was the closest. The hill comes in at 984 feet. And so the people of the village, initially they want to protest. They want to say, hey, even though it's under 1,000, we want it to be included on the list because this is our mountain. And for us, the contemporary viewing audience, it almost seems like this is part of the joke of the movie. But the narrator explains this is World War I. Dozens of men from this small community have already gone off to fight and have already died. This community it said, the people are bearing the weight of sadness and cannot handle any more failures. And so all of these people, all of them simple, all of them working on farms or mines or something simple like that, the leaders of the community decide that they are going to change the height of the mountain. They take the flagpole from the center of town and they mark off 16 feet, 20 feet actually, just to fill in the gaps. They put it into the ground at the top of the mountain and they start taking one wheelbarrow and bucket at a time up to the top of the mountain to make this hill. It's a beautiful story of what people can do together. I would keep the spoilers to myself, but you're probably not going to watch it. There's a priest in the movie, and he's kind of a central character. There's the priest and the owner of the pub, and they're always at odds. But on this, they agree that they have to do this thing for the people, to elevate their spirits by making this mountain. But what happens is they get a whole bunch of dirt up there, they're making good time, then all of a sudden it starts raining. And the scientist, they're going to leave, they're supposed to move on, and so the town conspires to lie about the train service, and they put sugar in his gas tank, all these things. It's kind of a lovable series of things they do. But it starts to rain, and they can't haul more dirt up while it's raining, and the rain is washing away some of the dirt they've already brought up. And finally, the rain subsides, it's sunny, it's clear, they can work, but it's Sunday. And the priest says, it's Sunday, we're not working. The owner of the pub comes to him and says, this is the only day we've got. The scientists are leaving tomorrow. You have to tell people it's okay. Nobody will work on Sunday if you don't give them permission. And he says, we will not spoil the Sabbath. So he goes back to his study. He opens the Bible in preparation for the sermon for that morning, and he turns to Psalm 99. And in the movie, again, this is a movie version of a novel. The novel is a story that was told to a child, right? So all of these things, each one is grander than the reality. The story didn't actually happen, but still it's a beautiful thing. But in the movie, as movies do, their light shines in the window, just highlighting Psalm 99, verse 9. And in the King James, it says that they will worship on God's holy hill. And he reads it and realizes, wow, this is what we have to do. So he preaches a sermon, encourages people, tells them of the love of Jesus, and then he says, after the service, we are going to build this mountain, and I am going to build the mountain with you. The movie goes on, everybody's working together. The rest of the week, the miners couldn't help because they were in the mines, but on the Sabbath they could. Everybody's bringing dirt up, everybody's working together. The priest, who's 80 years old, is bringing dirt up as well. And as night falls, the priest succumbs to the work. He's made way too many trips up the mountain, he has a heart attack and dies. So the people of the village, they call the other priest who just happens to be nearby. They do a small funeral service at the top of the mountain. They bury him at the top of the mountain, which, according to their practices, makes that mountain consecrated land. It is already holy in their eyes. It is already a mountain in their eyes. They do a little bit more work, and the scientist says, well, I'm leaving in the morning, and it's too dark. The funeral has gone too long. And they said, well, yeah, you've done this for us already. But they talk him into staying. They measure it. It's 1,003 feet, and it's a happy don't There's a marriage at the end, whatever. It's this beautiful mountain story, right? We don't always get that. Why is that mountain? Like, you'd watch the movie and the people of Alberta, would say that is not a mountain. It's green from top to bottom. That's not a mountain. But when you travel and you experience local cultures, people have an emotional attachment to their landscape, to their forests, to their lakes, and to their mountains. The story of Israel hinges a lot of its identity on Jerusalem being at the top of a mountain. There are mountains in many Bible stories, and we'll go through them this summer. Mount Zion, the Sermon on the Mount. There are so many stories that are connected to mountains that the mountains themselves add meaning to the story. When I came here from Ontario, the mountains were one of the feature attractions of Alberta. But in a lot of the stories that I've heard from people, you see that the stories mean something more. The mountains mean more than just geographic features. They are places of meaning. From people who've spent most of their lives in Calgary, the mountains also orient them. If they don't know where they are, they look around, okay, that's east, I know where I am now. And mountains are important to us. So I'm going to tell some of my mountain stories. You might get tired of mine, so I'm hoping we'll hear some of yours as well. The camping trip that I took this week was in Kananaskis country at the Blue Rock campground. And while I was there, I mentioned in the 10 o'clock service that I had a fantastic encounter with another camper. But while I was there, I was going to do a hike for this. I wanted to go do a big hike. I wanted to take fancy pictures. There's a hike close to there called Junction Falls. There's a 7-kilometer hike. At the end, there's a beautiful waterfall. And I was ready to do it. I had the map laid out. And as the time drew closer, I was hesitating. The first thing you have to do is cross the Sheep River. And the Sheep River in that part of Alberta is beautiful. It is the cleanest river I've ever seen. It just gently kind of rolls over the rocks that are there, but it is frigid. I was there Tuesday and Wednesday, and Thursday a little bit, where it was ridiculously hot. But the river itself was cold. I put my feet in the river, and my feet were starting to go numb. Now, that may have something to do with my weaknesses, but that's one of the things that was scaring me off. The coldness of the river, the heat of the day, and I thought, you know what, I think I'm just going to do this short hike. There's a short hike there. And I decided, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I've done this, but I've done this hike before. It's lost all of its beauty and majesty. I'll just do this hike. And there's also some information. There's a brochure that they used to have available. It's not there anymore. There's still these posts that hold brochures. There's no brochures, but you can get it online. So I had the PDF version on my phone, but I've done it before. So I was walking, and I took some pictures along the way. So Steve, can we get the sermon slideshow up again? I was doing this hike, and I like taking pictures of trees that have fallen. So here's one. You can't quite see up close, but I love the way when the roots of a tree are exposed, it kind of pulls up a whole bunch of dirt with it. You can kind of see that underneath of that tree is almost bedrock, right? That the roots were spreading out across the dirt. When the wind came, it couldn't stand up to the wind. So that's part of the limitations of this sanctuary is the colors aren't going to come out very well. But so this tree was overturned, and I turned to the brochure, and it was telling me about how this used to be a forestry area, which is amazing to me. It takes me an hour from my home in Okotoks to drive a gas-powered vehicle on paved roads with very few obstructions. It takes me an hour to get from Okotoks to this campsite. Well, less than 100 years ago, people were going out there with horseback and taking these trees from there to here. They eventually stopped. It turns out it wasn't terribly profitable. But there were trees that were cut during that time, and the brochure mentioned a tree that was still there. So this is from that brochure. I took the PDF, was following along. And so there were little posts with numbers on the top that you could follow along. And when I got to one of those numbers, then it had this little introduction there. It was talking about a tree that had fallen. And then it said, can you guess which way this tree fell? And then it goes on to explain some of the mechanics of how that's done, and the equipment and the team of horses and people, whatever. And then, so I was just reading this, and I'd read this before. So I was already a little bit kind of just glazing through things. And then I saw something that jumped out to me. I wasn't expecting anything because I'd done this hike before. I'd read this paragraph before. But it says here, unlike other areas along Sheep River where 1940s loggers salvaged poles from earlier forest fires, and these are lodgepole pines, just in case anybody is interested. Green timber was cut here. So fires would go through, and if you burn the outside of a lodgepole pine, you can still use it for a long list of things. But here they cut green timber, but there were rules, regulations. It says regulations ensured, it's right here in the middle. There we go. Regulations ensured that trees with less than 10 inches of stump diameter were left to grow, resulting in the forest we see around us today. Now, I'm a pastor, and I listen to a lot of sermon podcasts, trying to make, so I know what other people are doing. But every now and then I find a little sermon somewhere else. And on that particular hike, on that particular hot day, this was a sermon. Resulting in the forest around us today. This is the forest around us. You can't always see it, and that's kind of the injustice of hikes. You're in this majestic, beautiful surroundings. You get home, and you're like, yeah, that picture doesn't quite do it. But this is that scene around me. This is where I was hiking. So loggers had come in the 1940s, which isn't that long ago. Many of you would like all of us to believe that the 1940s weren't that long ago, right? In the 1940s, people were cutting trees here in what we call selective logging. Sometimes that means you only cut a particular variation of tree, or sometimes it means you cut 3 out of 4 trees or some percentage. Here it meant just the ones that were over 10 inches in diameter. Now, when I was out there the first time, when I've hiked there with other people for whom it was the first time, they marveled at the beauty of it. The majesty of that scene. And this is a picture from that hike that I'd done a bunch of times. And you look around and it just seems like, wow, this is unspoiled beauty. You look out there, you can't see buildings, you can't see roads, you can't see portions of the forest that have been cut down, you can't see factories. There used to be a sawmill close to where this picture was taken. You can't see any of that. It is unspoiled forest. But this isn't unspoiled. There were loggers here in the 1940s and for many years before that. They would go in, they would take the trees that they wanted, leaving bare patches all over the place. It is not unspoiled. It has recovered. It has regrown from the spoiling that we as human beings have done. So I know some of you are saying, hey, listen, we're not here for lessons on ecology. I get that. Do you ever look at a bunch of kids, maybe even teenagers, and you think, wow, those kids have such a future ahead of them. Those kids have so much joy, so much unspoiled enthusiasm. They've got the world ahead of them. Nothing has spoiled what's going to happen to their view of the world yet. Maybe that'll happen, but for now it's unspoiled. Let's let them exist in harmony. Let's not interfere with them. Let's just give them space because they've got joy now and maybe they won't later, but now they have joy, so let's celebrate their unspoiled joy. And then you look at yourself and you think, boy, the death that I've experienced, the sickness, the job losses, relationship breakdowns, all of those things. And you look at yourself, and what you see is not unspoiled joy, unspoiled, unpolluted creation. You don't see that. But you look at a kid and you see that. And then you look at this and you see unspoiled beauty. Well, I'm hoping that you will look at this picture and see yourself. Loggers came through, they took timber and built railroads and built houses and built furniture. They weren't trying to spoil the wilderness, but they did interfere with the beauty of the scene a little bit. So this isn't unspoiled. When those loggers left, the ecosystem responded, right? There were forces in the forest, and represented by people. There were forces in the forest who were taking away some of the beauty. But at the same time, there were forces that were regenerating, rebuilding, regrowing that beauty. And as soon as those forces, the forces that came to destroy, as soon as those forces were removed, the forces to rebuild and to regrow were allowed to flourish. So, for seasons of our lives, we give in to the forces in our life that destroys, that saps joy, that saps energy, that saps hope and enthusiasm. But there are always forces at work. There are always forces at work that are rebuilding, that are regrowing. And when we remove the destructive forces, the forces of regeneration are given space to work. Yeah, you are not unspoiled joy. You are not unspoiled hope and opportunity. But the forces of regrowth are inside of you. The Holy Spirit is working. The Christian community, the friends and family around you are also those voices, those forces of hope and regeneration. So this was my story. This is what I saw on this hike. That sometimes what we see as unspoiled beauty is really just beauty maintained by forces of growth and regeneration. Each of us can regrow. Each of us can regenerate. Each of us can overcome the defeats that we've experienced. Each of us can grow from the pain that we've endured. And the Holy Spirit and God will take us there. So this summer, I'm hoping that you will have an opportunity to see some of this beauty. But even if you aren't, I hope that you will be able to experience that growth and regeneration in your life. Amen.